Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comics and Coffee, starting your day out the nerdy way. I am Bobby Shortle, and I'm here with Nikki Alfaro.
Happy Friday, guys.
Happy Friday, indeed. So this has been, Nikki, I would say this has been our roughest week to come up with something to really talk about for like a topic for the week. Um,
Yeah, but still there's news going on, so it's not like we're just like scrounging.
that's true. There is stuff to talk about, and I guess last night and sort of this morning because I think it became more mirror sites started popping up again. DC and Warner Brothers, they had the Batman versus Superman Dawn of Justice trailer or teaser leak last night. I think it was from Argentina or something, I think is where it was from. It was something like that. And it got pulled last night, but then this morning I saw it pop up in a bunch of places. And I did, in fact, watch it. So we might talk about that in a little bit, but we have much stuff to talk about as well. Last week, obviously, we reviewed the first episode of Daredevil, and on Talking Comics, we kind of did a big discussion about the whole series because Steve, Stephanie, and myself had all finished it. But Nikki, how far did you get in Daredevil?
I finished it Monday night, and I was on the last episode. I had 20 minutes left, and a family member called me and kept me on the line for an hour. Finally, I had to be like, I'm sorry, I have work tomorrow." But
You're
yeah,
like, look, Hell's Kitchen is in danger. I need to get back.
I loved it. And it made me all the more excited for what's to come on the Netflix side of Marvel stuff. So, yay.
Yeah, absolutely. And right around that, I think it was around Monday or Tuesday or something like that. Uh, Pictures popped up, set photos. Jessica Jones popped up. We saw David Tennant in his purple purple suit, and we saw Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. So that's obviously full in development at this point. So we don't have a release date for that yet. But if you kind of judge by, I would say the amount of time that it took for us to see real Daredevil photos to when we got Daredevil. I'm guessing near the end of the year is when we're probably gonna end up seeing Jessica Jones, probably in the fall. I would say would be I think a pretty good bet for when we get to see that show, uh, which is exciting because I want to see how they're different from each other. You know,
Yeah.
uh, Jessica isn't really. I mean, she's definitely a fighter, but she's not as much of a punch first kind of character. So, I mean, at least in some instances of her, other instances it's different. But if they're going for more of like the Brian Michael Bendis alias stuff, it's going to be interesting to see what they go with on that. Um, but yeah, Daredevil was great, and obviously, if you want to hear more about that, we did a whole spoilery discussion earlier in the week. We won't do that here. I did say I forgot to mention the guy who played Ben Urich on the actual podcast. We talked for over an hour about Daredevil and didn't mention Ben Urich once. I thought he was awesome, and I thought that the actor who portrayed him did a great job. So I just wanted to say that publicly so that it was out there. Um,
I
uh,
agree wholeheartedly.
the other thing we didn't talk about, which I can't believe I forgot, I didn't remember that it came out before the show until you brought it up in our email last night, Nikki, which was that the new Ant-Man trailer came out. And it was our second look at the film and had obviously featured I think a little bit more idea of what the plot is and what the situations are and revealed some more of the humor of the movie as well. Nikki, what did you think of the Ant-Man trailer?
If you asked me 5 years ago if I'd be more excited to see Ant-Man over Batman versus Superman, I would have thought you were crazy. But that is the case at the moment because I watched it again this morning and the combat looks incredible. I like speaking of how Marvel's been trying to do things differently, um, even though it's all superhero stuff, like him like going small and then like getting back up to size and like taking somebody out. It looks really, really cool. And that last 10 seconds with the toy train sold me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that scene because I mean that feels particularly I don't know, Edgar Wright-ish, and I don't know how much of this is left over of the movie he was making to what we have now, but that feels very much like that. And you're absolutely right. The combat stuff looked great. I think it's funny because things shouldn't surprise you anymore about what these movies choose to embrace and what they don't choose to embrace. But the fact that he's just like walking around with ants and like talking with ants, I think is very cool. Um, so I'm excited to see that stuff. I'm excited to see the big small stuff and how um, stuff like that train sequence play out into bigger, more kind of dramatic instances. I think there's a scene where he's inside a server farm and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff, I think, it will be very cool. That kind of technology on a micro level. I think you can definitely see the humor a lot more there. Um, I still think they're holding. I think they're holding a lot of stuff back as far as the state of the world and stuff like that. Only because I think it's going to have a lot of to do with the fallout from something like Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think they're holding back a little bit on showing what the state of politics are, what the state of what Yellow Jacket, Corey Stoll is the actor. I don't remember the name of the actual character. The guy who runs PIM now. Why he's getting to do what he's getting to do and what involvement contracts have to do with it and whatever. So I think there's going to be a bigger sense there. But what I really liked was I still think that Michael Douglas and Paul Rudd look great together. I think they seem to have a really good chemistry together. I think Paul Rudd's going to bring a good amount of humor to it, which would be expected because it's Paul Rudd. And we finally got to see a little of Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne. And I'm interested to see how far they take her character as far as because I would imagine that she is going to become the Wasp at some point. Maybe not in this movie, but in this universe, since Janet is not part of it, and also at this point would be as old as Michael Douglas in the kind of Marvel timeline of things. So I doubt she'll become the Wasp. I'm also interested in because I know there's going to be flashbacks to when Pym was younger. So I'm interested to see what those turn out to be. But I think it sells it way more and like makes it seem way more unique than the first trailer did. But yeah, so I mean, that was one trailer that came out. We actually very soon after we finished recording this, Brian Verderosa and I, Talking Movies, recorded a Patreon exclusive reaction to the Star Wars Force Awakens thing. So that'll go up for Patreon members soon. But Nikki, I want to give you the chance to at least say what you thought about the trailer.
I was basically watching the whole thing like this, and I don't even know what to say. I'm a loss for words for Star Wars. I'm just really, really excited. Like, and you hear the music, and you see that Star Destroyer, and then ah, I don't have words. And then Han Solo at the end. Yeah, this is about as descriptive as I'm going to get.
If you're somehow one of the people who hasn't watched it yet, who actually watches a live comic book morning show and has not yet to watch the Star Wars trailer, you should probably go and do that. Yeah, it was great when it popped up, and it was interesting to see the almost universal praise for it and the kind of just happiness at what it was and what was happening. You don't get that very often, so it was nice. It
I
was
think
nice to see it.
most of all, it captures the spirit of the original, like at least the trailer. It captures the spirit of the original trilogy, where I think the prequels didn't really capture that same excitement, at least for me.
You're being very diplomatic and kind, Nikki, to to those three movies.
I grew up with those ones, so like I have to have like a little bit of kindness.
And Nikki, it makes me feel incredibly old that you just said I grew up with the prequel Star Wars trilogy. But Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit on the discussion with Brian on the thing, but I'm glad. I don't want to make this about any discussion about. I don't like any discussion being about shitting on other movies. It's like if you like this, you think this one looks cool. It's okay. This one just looks cool. It doesn't have to look cool in comparison to something else you think doesn't look cool. And I think that's kind of goes across the board. It's one of my issues a lot with criticism in general. Is you don't have to put something else down for something else to look good. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I think that people should just be happy that this movie looks awesome, and move forward from that. Um, yeah, and I didn't think we'd talk about this last one because I didn't think I'd get a chance to look at it, and I didn't really want to watch it the way it was posted. But I was reading a story this morning, and it was there, and I was like, well, let me just see if I click this bootleg Batman versus Superman trailer if it will actually play. And it did. So I want to talk about it a little bit because I mean it's news and it's out there, and I think that people want to know about it and probably know what some people think about it. So the first thing I'll say is I will not get into any discussion or critiques about what the movie looks like as far as like quality of shots because it's on a shitty cell phone, and so I have no idea what that actually is going to look like in HD. So cinematography wise, who knows? But and look, anybody watching this show probably very much knows my public opinion on what I think of Man of Steel. But Nikki, what did you take away from watching the teaser?
It's going to be dark. There's going to be lots of fighting between Batman and Superman, which with a title called Batman versus Superman, you'd expect. More darkness. Um, a lot of people against Superman because they're afraid of him, which if you take into account like the times, it's understandable. Um, it's pretty much what I'd expect going into it post Man of Steel. And I know I've never really talked about my opinions of Man of Steel, but I share a lot of the opinions of the rest of the Talking Comics crew. So I'm sorry, guys. um, but all of it stems from a love for Superman and my interpretation of that character. So seeing all this, I I think I will watch the trailer again once it's released. I don't know how much of my opinion will change, but I think at this point I will give the movie a chance. Um, but with all expectations at the lowest point.
I mean, look, let's be honest. I'm a hypocrite. I didn't like Man of Steel, but I'm gonna see Batman versus Superman, if not opening night, at least opening weekend. So let's get out of the way right there. I'm gonna see the movie, and I'm gonna talk about the movie a bunch. Uh, you know, I had some discussions with some people on Twitter last night, and again some text message conversations today before I'd even watched it. It popped up, and there was a few people who seemed excited about it, but there was an overwhelming negativity towards it, and it was a really funny situation because having not seen it yet, but also not liking Man of Steel, even I, seeing just all the negative reaction, was like, okay, guys, like settle down. Like it's a leaked cell phone trailer. In my opinion, is look, I didn't like Man of Steel. I was very disappointed. I felt like we were sold one bill of goods and then given another product. Um, and so I had a lot of anger with that. Going into the sequel to it with the same exact director and the same, I mean, it's David Goyer, I think, did the story, and then I can't remember that guy's name who did the script for Chris Terrio, I believe, who's scripting Justice League all by himself. I think finished the script and co-writes on Batman Superman. I think, but it's basically the same team going into it in the sequel. I had the assumption that it was going to look and feel just like the first movie because that's what happens, So I went into it being like, I have no expectations for this. Let me just watch it. And I took away a couple things. One, it feels to me in that trailer like Batman is a bad guy. That's like the sense I get. the voiceover from Alfred kind of being like, turns powerless men cruel, and like this like look on his face, look on Ben Affleck's face, very much seems like Batman's going off the rails, and that's why he takes on Superman. That's what it seems like to me. There's that line that's kind of gone the rounds that said like, do you bleed? Because I'm gonna make you, or whatever he says to him. That's the kind of stuff where it's just like, it's just not what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
and
Very diplomatic, Bobby.
yeah, it's just not what I'm looking for in a movie like that. I mean, look, I can totally understand a movie shaped around darkness when it comes to Batman. I think we've gotten plenty of dark Batman, and I would like to see something not light and funny, but like something that has a little bit more lift to it. But I completely can see, doing a Batman movie in the shadows, in darkness, playing with shades of gray, much like Daredevil is World of Daredevil. I will never understand, and I might be beating a dead horse at this point. I will never understand why they feel the need to hamstring Superman into the same milieu. I think it makes it less interesting to make Superman the same.
The mass of people would think otherwise, which is what frustrates me, because I've always been a champion for the golden boy characters, because I think they always get the whole they're boring spiel, and Captain America proved it wrong, in my opinion. I went into watching Captain America: The First Avenger thinking I wouldn't like it, and he's still my favorite Avenger in the MCU. So I think it can be done. It's just Superman in the shadow of Batman that's unfortunate. Because I've read Batman and Superman, and here, like, reading the ones where you see their different ideologies, it's the most interesting dynamic. And I think starting it off in the movies this way is a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean and look, and they talked about Dark Knight Returns being a very big inspiration. I mean, and that's great. I love Dark Knight Returns. I don't know many people who don't like Dark Knight Returns, but the point of Dark Knight Returns is that it occurs after like 30 years of them knowing each other. That's when that fight occurs. And look, I don't know how they're going to twist here. This is I saw a poor quality version of a like 70-second snippet of a movie that's coming out in a year. So I do not know how they're going to set that up. But look, I mean, the natural extension of Man of Steel would be the people not trusting Superman, would be this controversy about who he was and what he means to the world. But there's not. I could be wrong about this because I only watched it once. I don't think there's one shot in that entire trailer that's during the day. I don't think there's any sunlight in the entire trailer. And
if it was, it was probably cloudy.
Yeah. I just like, if I want to see a movie Batman and Superman, like I want to see the differences between those. Like you said, the differences between those two characters. That's what makes their relationship interesting, right?
They really are night and day.
Exactly, and I want to see that. And look, that's just what I want to see. I'm coming from a perspective of loving those characters in the comics, and I would like to see the movie version reflect that relationship in some at least in the spirit of them in there. And I mean, what I learned very much so after Man of Steel was that there's going to be people who just don't care about that, who want this version of Superman, and they think he's more interesting. And that's totally fine and valid. But I think that, and I think that the other issue too is begin this issue where people, I think that defenders of the movie or people who sometimes go like, well, it can't just be exactly like the Marvel movies because that would just be copying. But there's a different, it isn't a binary situation. It's not like super fun and silly or completely dark and grim. So I feel like there's a middle ground that could be found there. But again, if you're getting the same team that made Man of Steel and you're doing it again, this is what you're going to get. And it's just, people who are psyched for it, and that's great. But I can tell by watching that trailer that I'm going to have major issues with what is brought to the screen between the two of them. And I am much more interested in some of the other movies that they're doing that are kind of outside the direct control of Snyder and Goyer. Even though obviously their hands are going to be kind of all over all of it, but
As we
um,
can see from the Wonder Woman change up.
but I mean, Patty Jenkins, they named a new director, right? Michelle
Yeah.
McLaren got booted, and or they left. They parted ways because of creative differences, and you know, I hesitate to go too crazy about that because that happens all the time. You know,
Yeah.
talent changeover happens all the time in Hollywood, and you know, it doesn't mean that Michelle McLaren wanted to make the Wonder Woman movie that we all want, and she was told no. You know, that I think that's what people the position people jump towards because people are very skeptical about what that movie is going to be, and the treatment obviously of that character is incredibly important to people. We don't know that's the case. We heard some stuff about like she had like a talking tiger sidekick or something. There was some rumor about that. That's what Michelle McLaren part of the pitch was or something. I have no idea. All of it's
I'm just
hearsay.
imagining, like, can't we just have one shot during the day? No.
Mm. Patty Jenkins, who made Monster and was supposed to make Thor: The Dark World, is now set to direct Wonder Woman. It's very interesting. I mean, she gets kind of her second shot at doing this, and I hope it works out. You know, I mean, it sucks that Michelle McLaren isn't doing it. She is a very, very well regarded talent right now, and I think it brought a lot of cred to that movie. The fact that she was not only directing it but helping develop it. But you know, I don't know what Patty Jenkins is going to bring to it. I don't know what their vision of it is, and so we have to see. You know, I think that Suicide Squad looks very interesting. From all I've read and heard about it, and following David Ayer on Twitter, he seems very passionate about the property and very passionate about the roots of the property. You know, he tweeted one day out, he had like, you know, you have to take chances, but it's always good to go back to the source material. And he was holding like a, you know, John Ostrander like original Suicide Squad comic in front of him. So, you know, that's an instance where things being a little bit gritty and grim is going to work out because it's a movie about villains. Yeah.
You get what you expect.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
So, I think with all of this, like, we're skeptic, but above all, we really genuinely want these movies to work out. It might not seem like we're I think Talking Comics always gets flack for doing this Marvel versus DC thing when it comes with movies, but
Yes.
we genuinely want these things to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, like, at least with the two of us, we're gonna watch Batman versus Superman.
Oh, everybody's gonna watch it. Everyone at Talking Comics is gonna watch it. Right? So at least their anger
I don't know
can be
about
justified.
Stephanie.
Stephanie will watch it because we'll review it and she'll watch it. But yeah, I mean that's the thing too. Is like, and I try to talk about all the time with stand-up and when we debate things. You know, it's all coming. Whether you love Man of Steel and are defending it, or I'm giving my gripes about that movie and what's coming up, it comes from a place of love as well. It comes from a place of loving a version of those characters that I feel like isn't being served. And it's the same thing with the Fantastic Four movie that's coming out as well, right? Which we've had many discussions about. So I think that it all comes from a place of love. And yeah, I think DC, as far as TV goes, I mean, Marvel is catching up now. I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has been fantastic, and obviously Daredevil was great. Agent Carter was also great. But, you know, I love Arrow. I love The Flash. I'm very excited about Supergirl. You know, and so I think DC has a lot of good stuff going for it, and I think that what I love about Flash and Arrow, and this is kind of what I'm talking about as far as these movies go, is that look, they changed Ollie into kind of like well, they did with Ollie what they did. They've always done with Green Arrow in the comics, which is that he just kind of grows to fit whatever the people at the time want him to be. He's never been a character that, I mean, the Ollie that everyone loves and remembers is like the fight for the little guy, social justice warrior Ollie, but he wasn't always like that, and he's changed a lot over the years. And this Ollie, they kind of shaped much in the way that Ollie first became into being as sort of like, we can't do Batman, so we're going to do Green Arrow, and he's going to be sort of like Batman. It's very, very Nolan-esque Batman Begins type of thing. But it's very vigilante-driven. It's very serious. It's very, dour. And then you have the Flash, which exists in the same universe, but is like exactly the opposite, right? Which is big and bright and funny and fun, still dramatic, but has much more of a smile on its face than Arrow does.
And their team ups work because you could see their differences and ideologies and like that night and day comparison. It works.
Absolutely, and that's what, and the team up they did, right near the beginning of the season was great for that, right? Mm-hmm. It was a lot. It showed you, like when Ollie was in Central City, they played very much for laughs how stoic Ollie is, and Flash would do something and just like the stillness, of Ollie and Stephen Amell's performance around kind of like this craziness that was going on with the Flash was great, and it really showed what was going on, but it also didn't undercut why Ollie was so serious, right? Because when they go back to, Starling City, you see that what works for the Flash in Central City doesn't really work in Starling City. And both learn something from each other in those times. And I think that's great. I think there's a big place for that, and it's a more interesting dynamic. It's why, the conversations between Cap and Iron Man are so interesting in the Avengers, because they're coming from such different places. They both want the same thing, but they're coming from such different places. And I want that for these movies. I think that when you paint everything with the same brush, it doesn't make things better. It makes things more. It just like gentrifies. You're just gonna
get a black canvas.
Yeah,
you can't see anything.
Exactly. And look, I think that DC is under. I've always said this, but I think that DC is under disadvantage from Marvel, which is that all of their characters were created by different people, sometimes from different companies in different eras, and they all had to be smushed together into one universe. There's no way. There's no thematic resemblance between like Shazam and Green Arrow, or Shazam and Batman, or all these other characters. Even Batman and Superman are created by different people, not with the same, with no plans for a shared universe, with no whatever, So they have to kind of do some gymnastics to get their characters to fit into the same universe. But I think at times they go too far with it. But again, like we said, Nikki, that's just our thoughts and our opinions on the trailer and on that world. And look, I keep an open mind, and I want to see what it turns out to be. But I think in contrast, it's a very bad comparison for them, and it's probably a good thing they moved to going against what's going to be coming out in 2 weeks with the Avengers: Age of Ultron, which I think is going to have seriousness in it, but is going to still keep things with some amount of fun to them. And I think that's really the main thing for me, is that there's no joy in Man of Steel at all, and if that's not what you're looking for, then that's fine. But for me, in a Superman movie, I want to see something that has some joy to it, and that's what's missing for me mostly in that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think we'd talk about it. We talked about it for like 20 minutes.
And we were worried.
We were worried, yeah. We were definitely worried. I haven't read too much this week. I gotta get out of here in a couple minutes, but I haven't got to read too much this week. I read Convergence and the Green Arrow tie-in, and I read Bloodshot Reborn. Bloodshot Reborn might end up being my book of the week for the show. So I'm looking forward to talking in depth about that. And I wasn't crazy about Convergence number 2.
It was better for me. Like I thought it was better. There was a more of an emotional hook to it that I didn't feel in the last 2. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping it ends better than it started.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the Earth 2 characters, so I'm happy that they're kind of the main focus of what's happening. I felt there was a couple scenes that just they didn't. I just like they didn't play out to their fullest potential. I think the whole Thomas Bruce thing just it didn't play out. It had a chance to be so much emotion there and didn't really go for it the way I think they were trying to go for it. But you know, I'll keep reading it and I'll keep seeing what's up. There also there's a couple things we didn't talk about this week, which is that we're not going to spoil the end of Batman Endgame like the internet decided to do or DC decided to do this week. Um,
I'm staying away from it.
yeah, I haven't read it either, but there was the headline for what the story was a spoiler in itself. Like I don't understand how it just bothers me. Can I just finish reading the story that I've been reading for 6 months and I found out the end there and not on a random click on the internet? And the other thing too is I mean I didn't read the story either, so I don't know how much it divulges. But Thor #7, which just came out,
I
hints,
read that.
hints very greatly at who Thor is, but I think it's still a. I think it's still.
I'm thinking it's a red herring.
It is a red. I can almost guarantee it's a red herring. They're revealing it next issue. I think it's revealed in the previews that they posted online. So I haven't checked that out yet either. So we'll have to see what goes on with that stuff. I'm excited for the end of both of those things. The end, but the reveals on both of those things. But we'll have to see. But I think that's going to do it for Comics and Coffee for this week. If you guys want to get in touch with us, it's at Talking Comics on Twitter. I am at Bobby Shortle. Nikki.
I'm at I am Asian Batgirl.
Yeah, so tune in, guys. Special edition feed on the website. You can get this as a podcast if you want to listen to it that way. And check out Backup Stories also on the special edition feed. And yeah, that's going to do it for Comics and Coffee. Thank you for starting out your day the nerdy way with us. And we will see you next week.